morning, church on the Queensway. It is so good to be with you today. As Pastor Roger just said, I have been here a couple times, but the room's been empty. Let me tell you, it is better speaking to people. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up. It makes this really good. Well, give yourself a round of applause. Yeah. Listen, today I'm just going to get right into it. When I was 18 years old, I decided that I wanted to jump out of a plane, like with a parachute attached to my back, I should clarify. And so me and my buddy Rob, we left Windsor. We drove up actually close to here. It was somewhere in between Toronto and Barrie. And we found a place that would let us jump out of a plane. But before we could, we had to take this 8-hour course on basically how not to die. And the reason why we had to take the long course was because we weren't doing a tandem jump. A tandem jump is when you fall with a professional and they do all the work and you just get to enjoy it. What we did was called a static line jump. In a static line jump, you do all the work except you don't pull your chute. Basically, there's a static line, a cord attached to the aircraft and to your parachute, and when you fall far enough, it pulls your chute for you. So my buddy and I, we come up, we take the 8-hour long course, and basically in 8 hours, they teach you 3 things. Here's how you jump out of a plane. Number 1, you have to jump. That's probably the hardest step. You actually have to muster up enough courage to jump out of the plane. Number 2, you need to arc your arms as wide as you possibly can. And number 3, you need to look up. So take the course. I said, if you do these 3 things, you probably won't die. I signed some, big legal things, signing my life away. We get in the plane. We go thousands of feet up in the air. And I'm the first jumper. And I remember they just said, all right, jumper number 1, get ready. And so getting ready looks like this. Basically, if this is the hole in the airplane, like your left bum cheek is the only thing in the plane, the rest of your body is just flailing in the wind. It is terrifying. And so as I'm holding on for dear life, I did something that I shouldn't have done. I looked down. If you're ever going to jump out of a plane, don't look down first. And so I looked down at the ground thousands of feet below me. And in that moment, my mind went blank. Like I completely froze up. I lost focus. And this guy starts yelling in my ear. He says, jump, jump, jump. And so I jumped. I jumped out and I arced my arms as best as I could, but I didn't look up. I just kept staring at the ground. Now, you might be here and just wondering, well, Danny, how important is that last step anyway? Let me educate you this morning. It's very important, very important. And here's why, because your body will actually go in whatever direction your head is facing. So when I jumped out of the plane, instead of doing this nice kind of like backdrift, my body went into full-on front somersaults. Completely lost control of my body in the air. Now remember, I don't get to pick when I pull my chute. So what ended up happening was actually my chute opened when I was upside down. And I found myself now thousands of feet in the air, literally tangled in my own cords. My left foot, I remember, was right in front of my face, wrapped up in a cord. There was a cord wrapped around my neck, and I found myself thousands of feet fighting for my life, all because I lost focus for a moment. Just a moment. Today, if you're taking notes today, what I want to talk about, the title of my message today is this: do not lose focus. Do not lose focus. You see, I actually think that we are in a very similar situation to that. Sure, we're not thousands of feet in the air, plummeting to the earth, wrapped up in cords, but we are in a situation right now that we've never been in before. We continue to be in a situation where we're navigating challenges and just curveballs that are thrown our way almost every single day. And I'm not even just talking about COVID. I'm talking about being a follower of Jesus in Canada in 2021. Like the world is changing around us at a very, very fast speed right now. And if we're not careful, if we lose focus right now, then what we can do is we can end up getting tangled up in our own fear. We can get tangled up in worry and doubt or anxiety or apathy, all of which are detriments to the soul. So what I want to do today is I want to try to help us focus on what is absolutely most important. We're going to read today one of my favorite Bible stories, and I'm talking like in the entire Bible, my favorite Jesus story. It's incredible. Go with me. If you got a Bible, we're going to go to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, we're going to read just an amazing, amazing narrative here. It starts, we're going to pick it up in verse 28. Luke chapter 9, verse 28. It says this. It says, about 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. So it starts off by saying 8 days after. 8 days after Jesus said something. Now this is important, right? Because everything we're about to read this morning and study is linked to something that Jesus said 8 days earlier. So we got to ask the question, what did Jesus say 8 days earlier? Well, 8 days earlier, Jesus was with his disciples and he said, hey, who do people say that I am? And they responded back. They said, well, some think you're John the Baptist. Others think, you're Elijah. To be honest, Jesus, the people are confused. They don't really know who you are. And he says, okay. But what about you guys? My followers, my disciples. Who do you say that I am? And Peter, right? It's always Peter, right? Peter jumps up and he just says, you are the Christ, right? Christ is not Jesus' last name. Christ is this title. You are Messiah. You're the one that we've been waiting for. You're the one who's come to set the people free. And Jesus responds and he says, yeah, I am. But also, this isn't going down the way that you think. In a few moments, I'm going to be murdered. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to suffer. And 3 days later, I'm going to pull off Easter. And this threw the disciples. I mean, just threw them. They didn't know what to do with this. They're wrestling because in their minds, you see, Jesus they think the Messiah is going to come and set up this political kingdom that's going to kind of liberate them from Roman oppression. And Jesus, no, I am the Messiah, but I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die. And they didn't know what to do with that. And maybe you're here today or you're online today and you struggle with Jesus in the exact same way that the disciples struggled with Jesus. Maybe this morning, you've gone through COVID and it's just been hard. Maybe you've lost your job, your business went under, and you're wrestling with Jesus as, because in your mind, right, messiahs don't let that happen. Or maybe your children or your grandchildren are just like estranged from God, want nothing to do with the church, and you're wrestling with Jesus because in your mind, messiahs, well, they don't let that happen. Maybe you've lost somebody recently. Or maybe a family member, a parent or a child is sick, or you live in chronic pain and you're wrestling with Jesus as Messiah because in your mind, messiahs don't let these types of things happen. Well, Jesus knows. Jesus knows exactly what these disciples are wrestling with, the concept of him being Messiah and dying. So what he does is he takes Peter, James, and John, his inner three, and he takes them up on a mountain to pray. Now, where we're going to pick this up in the story, it is about to just get wild. Watch this, verse 29. It says, as he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Okay, anyone's jaw just dropped? Because it should have. Okay, this is seriously one of the most epic, I'm talking intense surreal passages, stories in all of the scriptures. It says that Moses and Elijah appeared on the mountain with Jesus. Now let me tell you why that's wild, just in case you don't know kind of like your Hebrew literature. At this point, Moses has been dead for 1,400 years. Elijah never died. But 900 years before this, a chariot came down from heaven, picked him up, and took him away. And now these two guys appear on the mountain with Jesus. I mean, this is wild. Like, just absolutely, why these two? Like, we got to ask that question. Why Moses? Why Elijah? Like, it just seems a little bit random, but it's not. You see, because between the two of these guys, they sum up the entire Old Testament. Moses represents the law. Elijah represents the prophets. It's as if all of human history has shown up for this moment. And it says that not only did Moses and Elijah appear on the mountain, but it says that also in that moment that Jesus changed. Let me use the word, he transfigured. And to be honest, even the authors of the Gospels, they struggle to try to articulate what happened. Mark's gospel, I think it's the funniest. Mark's gospel says, it was kind of like a Tide commercial, right? It says that Jesus became whiter than you could bleach anything on earth. That's how Mark describes it. Matthew's gospel says, no, he was like the sun, like there was like rays shooting out of him. And Luke's gospel, he says, no, he was like lightning. He changed, he became white like lightning. So church, I just want you to go there in your minds, right? They're on the mountain, and all of a sudden you got Moses, you got Elijah, you got Jesus, and the full-on deity of God bursting out of him. And watch what happens. Verse 32, it says, Peter and his companions were very sleepy. But when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And it just says this, he did not know what he was saying. So Jesus takes them up on a mountain to do what? To pray. Jesus is praying, they're sleeping. This is not going to be the only time that this happens, right? But I love it. It says that Peter, James, and John, they wake up to the very tail end of this whole thing. They wake up and they see Jesus and they see Moses and they see Elijah. And then all of a sudden Moses and Elijah start to leave. And so Peter doesn't want this to end. So Peter just blurts out. He says, Master! I just picture like everyone just turning and staring at Peter like, what? He just, Master! He says, it's really good to be here. Just thought you should know. You guys want some tents? He says, I can set up some tents. Like it's this wild moment. And listen, I don't think this is ever going to happen to you, but just in case it does, I want to help you, church. If Jesus, Moses, and Elijah show up at your house, okay, like this afternoon, they just show up at your house and the full-on deity of God is bursting out of Jesus. Let me help you. Ready? Be quiet, okay? It's okay to say nothing. Like, it's okay. Peter has not learned this lesson yet. I love the Bible has to cover for Peter. Like, I love it. The Bible just says, yeah, he didn't know what he was saying. He's just blurting things out. And it's humorous, but can I just be honest? Like, I get it. I get it. Peter's on the mountaintop with Jesus and Moses and Elijah, and he's sitting there saying, this is awesome. This is amazing. I want to stay here because he's down the mountain. Down the mountain is just all that stuff that Jesus was talking about 8 days ago. Down the mountain is pain. Down the mountain is suffering. Down the mountain is death. I hear. I want to stay here. Let's set up some tents. We love the mountaintop with God, don't we, church? We love those intimate moments where we see and we feel and we experience Him so close. And we should. Absolutely, we should. There's nothing wrong with those moments. We need desperately those moments. What's wrong is when we want to set up camp there and stay. You see, Jesus, he didn't bring them up there on the mountaintop to stay. He brought them up there so that they could get a glimpse of who he was. Because Jesus knows not just what's waiting for him down the mountain, he knows what's waiting for them. Peter, faithful Peter, right? Peter will eventually be crucified upside down. James will get thrown off the Temple Mount and beaten with clubs to his death. John gets dipped in a cauldron of boiling oil, and when it didn't kill him, it just kind of scared everybody, so they exiled him to the prison island of Patmos. See, Jesus knew what was coming. Jesus knew the trials that they would face. Jesus knew the temptation that they would face every single day. The questions that they would ask to say, well, is Jesus actually worth it? Is he worth the pain? Is he worth the loss? Is he worth the sacrifice? And so he brings them up there not to stay, but he brings them up there to get a glimpse. Just a glimpse of who he really was. And if you think the story can't get any wilder, let's just keep reading. It gets even wilder. Watch this, verse 34. It says, while he was speaking, it says, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, this is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. I love that. It says, while he was speaking. Okay, who's speaking? Peter. While Peter is incoherently rambling on about tents and how good it was to be there, it says that God the Father left heaven and just showed up in a cloud and just cuts him off. Like, how off do you have to be in your comments to make God the Father leave heaven and show up in a cloud just to make you be quiet? Like, honestly, like Peter pushes God's buttons here. He does. He has this moment where he says, let's set up 3 tents. And in that moment, Peter lost focus. In that moment, Peter lost what was actually most important. In that moment, what Peter does is he puts Jesus on the same platform as that of Moses and Elijah. And God shows up and says, no, not on my watch, Peter. This one's my son. This one's my son. Listen to him. Follow him. Surrender to him. Right? Like there's this epic moment, and then all of a sudden, once God the Father says this, cloud goes away, Moses and Elijah are gone, and Jesus is the only one left standing. Isn't that a good story? Like, come on, this is just like wild. Like, it is absolutely wild. And one of the reasons, church, why I wanted to share this in this season is that I really believe, like I just really believe that it's going to give us some stuff to focus on. Because in the same way that Peter, James, and John, right, they needed a glimpse of God to sustain the pressures of the world. Can we just be honest? So do we. Like, so do we. So there's a couple things in this text that I just want to pull out and just kind of have them sit this morning. Here's the first one. Here's the first very obvious thing in this story. Here it is. Jesus is God. Someone's thinking, wow, you drove all the way from Windsor for that. Yes, I did. I figured if God, honestly, if God would leave heaven to come down to earth to make this known in a cloud, I can leave Windsor to come up to Toronto to reiterate it. Okay? Jesus is God. Right? God the Father shows up in the cloud, and what does he say? These words, "This is my son." Now that phrase, "this is my son," or Jesus is the Son of God, does not mean that God the Father had a child one day and his name was Jesus. Like there was this moment when Jesus was not and now he is. That's not what this is saying. When we use that phrase that Jesus is the Son of God, what it means is that God has literally birthed into existence his essence, his very being in human form. This is what it means. So he just says, this is my Son. Jesus is God. Now, clearly, not everybody believes that, right? Our world today, Toronto, Windsor, both. Toronto more so, incredibly multicultural. We've got all sorts of different belief groups and all this stuff. Like the Muslims have a high view of Jesus, but he's not God. He's a prophet. The Jews believe that Jesus is a false messianic claim. Many Hindus think that Jesus is the incarnation of the god Vishnu. You know, you have the Mormons who believe that Jesus is the spirit brother of Lucifer, the devil. You have the Jehovah's Witnesses who think that Jesus is the archangel Michael. You have many atheists or agnostics that would just see Jesus as like a good moral teacher or a philosopher of sorts. But none of that is in what we just read today. What we just read, what God declared from the cloud on the mountain, and what is on full display, like the radiance, the glory that was pouring out of him, is that this man is God. Jesus is God. And it's important when we talk about the glory. You know, Mark calls it, like he was bleached. Matthew says it was like the sun, or Luke says it was like lightning. It's important that we understand that that glory was coming from the inside out, not the outside in. Now, here's why that's important, because centuries earlier, Moses went up on a mountain. Centuries earlier, Moses went up on the mountain, and he spent this prolonged time in the presence of God, and when he came down the mountain, his face was actually glowing. It was wild. He was basically like sunburnt from God. He spent so much time, and then after a while, he came down the mountain, his face stopped glowing. And okay, can I just tell you, that's not what we just read. Jesus was not sunburnt by God and then started glowing. Jesus is God. The white like lightning, this is coming from inside of him. It is bursting out. And maybe today, even as we were reading this and you were going through that part of the story, you were thinking, oh, that's a miracle. Can I just tell you, no, it's not. The miracle was not that Jesus started shining. The miracle is that somehow all of that glory has been hidden for 33 years. Right? Like in human flesh. Like this, what we're reading here, this is a pause in the ongoing miracle of Christ's humanity. The miracle is that all that lightning has somehow been hidden from human eyes. That's the miracle, but for a moment, the ongoing miracle paused so that these three guys could see who he really was. And who is that? God. God. God has birthed himself into the world, his essence, his reality in human form. His name is Jesus Christ. He is God. Like, can we just for a moment, like church, we need to focus on this. Jesus is God. Your family is not God. Your spouse is not God. Your children are not God. Your job and your paycheck and your cars and your houses and your boats and your toys are not God. There is only one God, Jesus. He is God. That is what is on full display here. And that is not the only thing that's on full display here. Here's the second thing. Jesus is not just God. Here's the second part we need to see. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the way. God shows up and says, "This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him. Follow him." Literally, the idea here for us is look at what he did. Do what he says. Follow in his footsteps. Love like he loved. Serve like he served. Walk like he walked. Talk like he talked. Pray like he prayed. Follow him. Listen to him. Jesus is not just God. It's not just this this vertical relationship. It's this horizontal walk through. Jesus is the way. And listen, one of the hardest things that we will combat in the Christian church in North America is this: proclaiming that Jesus is God, but not living like Jesus is the way. And when that happens, quite honestly, that is just confusing to the world. It's just confusing to the world because Jesus is not just God. Jesus is the way. He is the very one that we follow. And so you see this, right? Like on the mountain with Elijah representing the prophets, with Moses representing the law, God speaks and says, yeah, Jesus, this one, yeah, he's my son. Listen to him. Follow him. Worship him. Surrender to him. Keep your eyes, church, fixed on him. And here's why. Because we need it. We need it. It was Pastor Billy was up here last week, and I was listening to the message, and he was just talking about how it's becoming increasingly more unpopular today to say that you're a follower of Jesus. And that is just so true. Like, things are changing very fast, as I said. Like, there are entire circles right now that would look in on what's happening in this very moment, and they would say that not only are we deluded and misguided, but we are also immoral. That those who follow Jesus, like we're the ones that are going to go down on the wrong side of history here. Like, this is the freight train that is now starting to steam its way through. And that is a pressure that if you have not faced yet, there will be a day that you will. There will be a moment, right? This is a pressure that we will face increasingly more and more and more. Do you want to know what we need? We need a glimpse of the glory of God. Because that is the only thing that's going to hold us. In the same way that Peter, James, and John here, they needed to see who Jesus really was. Church, so do we. Like, so do we. We need a glimpse of his glory. We need a glimpse of his greatness because it will be the only thing that will hold you. A pastor's preaching will not hold you. A great worship set that we just had. I mean, this was fun. Can we just hear it for the worship team? Like, incredible. Incredible. It's not going to hold you long term. Singing good songs or listening to messages or coming into this building, it won't hold you. You know what's going to hold you? Getting a glimpse of the glory of God. That's what's going to hold you. Seeing Jesus for who he really is. God. God incarnate, birthed into the world to come and to save us and to model a new way of living. That's what holds us. There is a freight train steaming through Windsor, steaming through Toronto, and it's not losing speed right now. There are pressures and temptations and afflictions and persecutions. And what we need is to see Jesus, just to get a glimpse of who he really is. I love that song, and I'm not a singer by any means, but I love that old song, just turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. In the things of earth, in the persecutions of earth, in the afflictions of earth, in the trials of earth, will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Church, that's what we need. That's what, yeah. Yeah. Please, I hope you're not clapping for my singing there. What we need, what the church needs in 2021 is a fresh revelation of the glory of the one that we serve, Jesus Christ. So, church, may you not lose focus. May you keep your eyes firmly planted on Jesus Christ. May you get a glimpse of his glory. and may you shine bright no matter what.